Catholic social teaching has a profound insight to share with us, learning about poverty and social justice. First and foremost, we learn from Scripture. Throughout the history of Scripture, we see in the Old Testament and then in the person of Jesus Christ through the New Testament, a priority for those who are experiencing poverty and injustice. Jesus talks in his ministry about supporting those who are excluded, those who don't have enough material to be hungry or thirsty, to be clothed, or to visit those in prison. Most importantly, he teaches us that alongside loving God with all our heart, our soul and our mind, we also need to love our neighbour as ourselves, and therefore we need to prioritise people in our community, in our society, and particularly those who are vulnerable. One of the first important principles, therefore, is around human dignity, which teaches us that every person is filled with innate dignity that comes from God. And because of that innate dignity, we're therefore duty-bound to respect the needs, wishes, and desires and hopes of people who are experiencing poverty. The second thing that I think Catholic social teaching has to be able to teach us is about solidarity. What's our experience of trying to walk through the shoes of other people, particularly those who are experiencing poverty and injustice? How can we see and empathise with them in their own personal experiences? A third point to think about is the common good. How can we make sure that the resources of the whole community are shared equitably across all of the different aspects of that community? That no one is left behind and that every individual has the access to resources so that they can flourish and progress and live life to the full. A further principle to think about is what's known as the option or preferential option for the poor. This is something that originates in the Gospel, but is then brought forward right up to today in the teaching of Pope Francis, where he talks about how we ensure that people who are experiencing the vulnerability and trauma of poverty are not left behind, how we are able to engage with them and prefer and prioritise their needs as part of the whole community, so that resources are shared equitably and that their needs are being met. Over the past few years, we've seen an increasing number of people experiencing poverty in the UK. This is in a country which is one of the largest economies in the world, with one of the most sophisticated systems, and yet still people are excluded, marginalised and experiencing the trauma of poverty. There are a number of different reasons for that. Many of them are systemic forces that are beyond the control of the individual or community who's most affected. Over the past few years, we've seen increased challenges for housing and accommodation. The cost of living has increased. Access to various different sources of support has been limited. And therefore, it's particularly relevant now because of the circumstances that we face post-pandemic, where people are increasingly being forced into poverty, many of whom are children, where there's a perpetual cycle then of poverty because they feel trapped, unable to escape the circumstances. For those people, they are often disadvantaged as well in terms of their healthcare, and so being able to access healthcare properly and well means that they not have the opportunity to flourish, to develop, and to get out of the cycle that often feels traumatising and trapping them into a particular challenge that can last for generations. Tackling poverty is really complex. It's got a multifaceted and multi-layered approach that's required, with a long-term strategy that's necessary for being able to respond accordingly. Catholics, however, can take a really proactive approach in helping to deliver this in their communities and across society as a whole. First and foremost, as a worshipping community, it's important for prayer, not just for people who are experiencing poverty, but for also those who are seeking to try and tackle the root causes of poverty and help people who are experiencing that trauma. The second thing is also particularly challenging. It requires us to enter into relationship with people who are experiencing poverty, to see and experience the authentic challenges that people experiencing poverty have in their daily living. So, for example, I would encourage people to perhaps go and visit in an appropriate way one of the centres that might be operated by any one of the different Catholic parishes, schools, dioceses or charities around the whole of England and Wales. Engage with them sensitively, appropriately, with those people who are experiencing the different trauma and challenges of poverty. Enter into human relationship. That is the nature of who we are as a people of Christ. The third thing I would encourage people to do is obviously to volunteer in those services and give their time, their effort and the resources to help alleviate the different challenges. And fourthly, I'd encourage people to look at advocacy. Maybe you want to get involved in campaigns around particular issues. The 2-child benefit cap is particularly disproportionately affecting children and young people. Maybe you'd want to get involved in lobbying with your community to end some of those particular challenges. You might also want to get involved with young people who have incredible dynamism to support the call for justice in our communities. Help educate them, help them learn about the different challenges and issues that people are facing in their communities. Help them act and call attention to this particular challenge for our society. And then finally, be a visible, credible witness of our faith in the communities that we live in. Engage in community development work, not just within our Catholic communities, but more broadly with other partners, other faith organisations, and potentially within our local authority or government areas. Be a representative of our faith in those different communities, lobbying and being active in calling attention to poverty and the different challenges that people experience there.